Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I can report apologies for absence this morning from your Vice Chairman, Councillor Graham Steady. Thank you.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Have we all had a chance to?
Sorry, Chairman, am I able just to put on record Councillor Platt's apologies for lateness, but he will be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely. Minutes of the last meeting. Have we all had a chance to read them? Are we happy? Declarations of interest? No. Question? So. Was there a move and a second? Oh, sorry. Well, I'll move them. Councillor Bailey. Yeah, I think we've had declarations of interest. There are none. Questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38. Morning. Welcome, Councillor Platt.
None received, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. And report of the Internal Auditor, A1 report on internal audit. Craig.
Thank you, Chairman. So, since the last Audit Committee, we have completed 4 audits. Those audits are parking services, identity and access management, environmental health, and the crematorium. All of which received what we class as a satisfactory level of assurance. There are some moderate issues that we've identified and we've raised with the service, but nothing that we would say significant to raise here today. That all received an overall adequate assurance report. Before I move on to, that's what we've completed that period. If anyone's got any questions about any of those audits, I'm happy to go through that now if you want to before I move on.
Any questions? Yep, Councillor Platt.
So just a bit of background. Have you still got the same levels of staffing that you had previously, and therefore would 4 internal audits be the right number of audits that you would have gone through in this period of time?
So normally we would be reporting back between 5 and 6 audits. So we're 1 behind where I'd like to be, but we've got the same levels of staff. We've just recruited a new apprentice, which will help again, as previously yeah, hopefully. So we haven't got a start date yet, but hopefully it'll be soon. So we've got other things at play. So at the moment, myself and Karen are working on a spindles review, which is also taking some of my time. But I was going to put a bit of a marker down anyway around that a bit later on, but just to say that at the moment I'm not saying that we won't be able to deliver the plan. I think that we can make up where we are. The only thing is that if we do get some more complex audits where there are some issues that need more of my time, then I may be coming back to the Audit Committee saying we're probably going to be buying in some resource to make sure we can finish the plan, or asking to potentially move the plan around. But I'm not there yet, but I will update you as soon as I know, if I think that that's going to happen. So does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. Yes, it does. I've got one more though, Chairman, if I may, and that is, does that mean that the ones that you've done you don't consider these to be complex audits? These are quite relatively straightforward audits.
No, not that they're not complex. It's just that there are no significant issues for me to need to spend more time with the service to talk about. So in terms of the auditors done the work, and they haven't identified anything that would make us spend more time on it. So it would need my input, because the auditor has gone in, they've identified any issues, and it's managed with the service. So if we end up undertaking audits at a later date, and there are some significant issues that would need me to bring back to this committee. I would therefore need to spend more time with the service managers to discuss them, and that's where things might start to come back a bit.
I have a question. Last time we discussed that obviously you took on an extra role. So how are you finding that extra work? Are you sort of, is it all working out okay, or is it giving you pressure, or?
I'm enjoying the additional responsibilities. It's not a at the moment I'm not feeling under pressure. As I've noted in my report here that we're working with IT to look at ways of doing things differently, and trying to make us use the most effective way in terms of compliance work and undertaking inspections and everything else. So I'm hoping that will change the way we do things and buy me a bit more time. But as it stands at the moment, I'm not too concerned about the additional responsibilities.
That's good to know. And yeah, hopefully streamlining processes will hopefully make us a bit more productive. So yeah, that's brilliant news. Thank you, Craig. Do we have any more questions? Yep, Councillor Platt.
Thank you. So page 24, you've got overdue more than 3 months for. Could you just share with us what they are?
Yep, so if you go to, so if we move on to the, which page? I've got page 31, which is the list of outstanding significant findings from historically that was requested by the committee. So we now provide that. So that would include those 4. So the 4 will be housing repairs and maintenance, and recycling and waste, and care line. So those are the issues that are still on our radar, but they're obviously, because we're reporting the whole issue back here now, you're seeing what I see. So we know that the service have implemented majority of what we wanted them to do. Damien has come along numerous times to give us an update of where they're at. And this is sort of what I would be doing in the day-to-day of just managing that and looking at progress and seeing where they are. Because as we've talked about in the past, that a lot of these issues were long-term issues overall, because there's different elements to try and implement. So we're just making sure that you can see that, and once we're happy that it's got to the stage where everything we would expect to be done, we would sign it off, and then it would come off of that list.
Please carry on.
So on that then, is Damien able to add anything further to the commentary that's on the report?
I believe he's here to answer a few questions today, so if you'd like to take that, Damien.
Happy to. Thank you, Councillor Platt. So yes, I can. So on the first item there, to do with the data integration, that's about 99% complete. There are some small snagging issues that the team tell me they need to resolve, but not ones that are causing them sleepless nights. So we're happy that that's moving along. It's been used in the way that we want it to use, and we're looking at how we now expand that and push it out to other elements within the teams that work at Northbourne Depot. So on that one, yes, that will continue. We'll always look at that, but the issues are minor. On the second item on Craig's list there, again, that's no further action at this stage, which is exactly where we are with the team. In relation to the waste issue, we're now just beginning to start the final phase 4, which is looking at the debt and collecting of that debt. We're just under 50% collecting of that now, so we've had some very positive feedback from people when we contacted them. They've made payment, still want the service. So we're intending to start that final phase on the 1st of October and looking for a sort of completion date around the end of November on that. That then will get us to a position where we'll understand those that have paid, those that haven't paid, and we'll need to take a view as to what we then choose to do with those who haven't paid. I'm just going to wander down that list a little. Gellon's is not my report.
Chairman, can I just ask then, the 50% collection that you've had, does that match up with the amount that you thought you were going to be able to recover?
I think we're close to where we thought we would recover. I think if you talk to my team, we all had slightly differing views. I may have had a slightly optimistic view that I would have wanted to collect more like 60%, and they had a more pessimistic view where they thought we wouldn't necessarily collect as much as we have. But that is only, in effect, identifying. So once we've finished the fourth tranche, we'll know exactly what that figure is of those who have paid. And as I say, and then we'll know those who haven't, and those we will have to take a view as to what we do with that outstanding debt from there.
And is your new system, are you confident in the new system that you've got now with Veolia and identification because this is how it went wrong, isn't it? So can you just elaborate a little bit on how that's working, please?
Yeah, so we effectively had two systems before. So we're moving everybody onto one system. Veolia have included an in-cab technology now that allows them to track those people who have and haven't paid, so we'll know who we collect from and who we don't collect from. It's still fairly early days, but all the feedback I'm getting is positive, both from my officers and from Veolia when I talk to their senior management as well. So yeah, at the moment I'm comfortable that we're moving in the right direction and we're achieving what we want to achieve there.
Councillor Fairley.
Thank you. Just in terms of feedback that you're receiving, you're talking about internal feedback. What about external feedback from people that are using the service in terms of how the issue may have impacted on their perception of Tendring District Council?
Personally, I haven't received anything. I think the fact that the service continues to grow and is growing at a fairly healthy rate, it is something that people want and something that people want to use. So I personally haven't had anything negative from it. I mean, you'll get the usual, you forgot this collection, this hasn't happened. That's fairly BAU. You know, it's quite standard in waste that you're going to get those sorts of complaints anyway. But as far as I can see, the figures are growing. That to me says that people still want to use the service, and that hasn't had a negative impact.
Any more questions? No? Craig?
We're on the appendix. Is that any more questions on any of the outstanding issues there? Or I'll move on to... No? Okay. So the next part of my report is about well, we've talked about resourcing, which we always talk about. So I'm hoping that we have a new apprentice soon to help us out, and we can keep them for longer than 6 months. The other stage, so we talked about the internal audit charter. So at this stage, we need to agree the charter. I previously mentioned about the new global internal audit standards in the past. They are coming in or expected to be mandatory in January 2025. So I am not proposing to change my charter at the moment because it aligns with the current standards. But CITFA, who's the governing body for public finance, have essentially said that they are going to be looking at the new global standards, because they don't necessarily fit with local government. And they will release something in April 2025 to let us know in terms of how they understand them and how they're going to affect local government. So essentially what I'm saying is I'm going to keep our charter as it is this year, and then as those new standards come in and as CITFA update us on what they believe is their interpretation of those standards, I will then make those changes if we need to our charter and bring it back to the committee.
Any questions on the charter? Yep.
Just a comment really, in as much as Craig, you assured us last time that I was here that we spoke about this and we explored with you what you were comfortable with. I'm sure you'd be seeking advice to the relevant people, and if you're comfortable with it and so are your colleagues, then I am as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, yes, I am comfortable with it as it stands. Thank you. I think that's really it from my reports. I don't think there's much else in there for me to talk about. If there's any other questions, happy to take them.
Councillor Fairley.
Thank you. Yeah, I have one general question, not in relation to a specific issue, but when you're looking at your levels of assurance and you got adequate as one level and then substantial as another, what are the steps to get from one to the other? Would you expect to see more substantial are audits that you do measured against what they achieved in previous earlier audits? Okay.
Yeah, so every audit that we undertake, we look at the direction of travel. So if we've previously undertaken that audit in the last year or 2 years, we would look at has it improved from that previous time. So that will be included in our overall opinion. So ideally for me, I'd like to see them all substantial and there's no issues, but we don't always have that. And it is a bit of a judgment as well in terms of how we get to those different levels. For me, if there are any major issues at all, anything that's significant enough for me to bring it to the committee, I would give that report an improvement required, because it's substantial enough for me to have to report it elsewhere and get your input and your direction on what to do next, or questions that want to be asked. So I would give that an improvement required. Where it's adequate, the sort of fine line between it is if there are quite a lot of what we say called moderate issues, so things that come up within the service but they can be managed quite quickly. There's things you can change, things you can do that will improve that area quite quick. So we wouldn't necessarily bring that here. That's what we would class probably as adequate assurance, because there are some medium-sized issues that can be dealt with between ourselves and the service. If it's substantial, there's not a lot in there at all. There's maybe a few minor issues that we might say you might want to think about this or look at that. But if there were, say there was 10 or more moderate issues, then I might make the judgment that there's an issue there. I want to bring that to the committee, because it's across the board and it's probably bigger than maybe what we think. So there is a bit of subjectiveness to it, but that's sort of how I would look at them when we're giving those assurance statements.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No? Okay, so the recommendation that the report be considered and noted, internal audit charter be reviewed and approved. I'm happy to move. I need a seconder. Pam? Councillor Morrison, rather. Thank you. Thank you. Report of the Assistant Director of Legal and Governance, A2 complaint procedure and annual letter to the Council from Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. So first of all, I will introduce this item to say this is the first time that, sorry, I've got my reading glasses on as well so I can see anybody. This is the first time that this type of report has been presented to the Audit Committee in relation to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman annual letter. The letter is received by the Chief Executive, Leader of the Council and the Chairman of the relevant Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and it's forwarded on to also make sure those individuals have received it from the Chief Executive's office. That is the requirement of the Local Government Ombudsman, so we have always been complying with the request of the Local Government Ombudsman. However, in light of the best value standards that were updated and introduced last year, consulted on last year and published in May this year from the former government, which is the still the statutory guidance, we as officers felt that it was appropriate as well to bring it to the Audit Committee to almost complete the circle in relation to making sure that as an organisation we learn from the lessons of complaints. So I'd like to just say first, I wanted to give that bit of introduction. The letter that you have in front of you, the report starts on page 41 of your agenda, and the letter received from the Ombudsman is on page 53. And on page 56, you have some nice little pie charts. Circles, sorry, actually. One of the things we wanted to highlight, and this is not in any way to disrespect the role of the local government ombudsman at all. We highly respect it, and we work with them closely as we are obliged to do so. The one thing I wanted to draw to members' attention, it is in the report, but you will see on page 56 at the top where it says that in 23-24 that 67% of complaints were that were investigated were upheld, and they is higher than the average. So I wanted to bring your attention to that, and that they are referring to 4 upheld decisions. I also, though, wanted to refer you to some data which is in the report, and I'll specifically say on page 46, you've got the beginnings of a table which provides you on information on each complaint that's been upheld. And we have, especially where there's been maladministration, you will see on page 46 at the bottom of the first complaint, the Ombudsman actually said in their final decision, I've completed my investigation on the basis that there was no fault in the Council's actions. This decision is therefore at odds with the classification now of the complaint by the Ombudsman. And exactly the same information was provided on the 4th complaint, which is referred to at the bottom of page 47, where the Ombudsman said that they found no fault with the Council. We're not going to challenge the Ombudsman's letter, annual letter. That would be the wrong thing to do, but I just wanted to highlight that we are presenting to you the full picture with regards to data that's been received through the year. The other I wanted to confirm is that you may be aware that under my statutory duty as the Council's monitoring officer, I'm under an obligation to report to either Cabinet if it's an executive function, or full Council if it's a non-executive function, where there has been finding of maladministration by the Ombudsman. We have been doing that on every single complaint, and the report has provided you in that table of when those individual matters were reported to the relevant decision-making body. So we are pleased to say that we have been open and transparent with all of these decisions as they've come in over the last few years. The Ombudsman's letter says that we were above average in relation to the number of complaints upheld, which I've just referred to in the introduction, but also as well that we are 100% in compliance with recommendations, so we're above the national average, and we're also above the average when it comes to satisfactory remedies being provided by the organisation. So there's two pleasing pieces of information. What we have done in the report is we have highlighted on page 46 those pointers which have arose from the complaints that we have been looking at as an organisation for last few years. just so members are aware, our general complaints system is that stage 1 complaints are handled within the service, and then stage 2 complaints, they go to the chief executive, and Keith Simmons and the leadership support team would then do some investigations on behalf of the chief executive, and it is the chief executive that signs off the stage 2 complaint letter. If an individual is still unhappy with the outcome of the stage 2 complaint, they then go on to the Ombudsman. It is fair to say in local government and public sector, having a complaints process and responding to the complaints that the public wish to bring to our attention, whether it's service delivery or lack of communication or anything, is healthy. We want to listen to our residents, and we want to resolve issues where we can. There will be instances where the member of the public or the complainant will always be unhappy with the outcome. But we must make sure that if we have a policy, we have followed it. If we have procedures, we have followed it. If we have promised to communicate back to the individual, that we communicate. So these are the things that when you look at page 46 at the top, we are saying back to the organisation as lessons learned from these complaints that we do need to be aware of reasonable timeframes when delivering services. We do need to review service delivery. If we have a policy, we should follow it. We should keep records of decisions taken. We should be thorough when matching payments to applications. And we should not stray from an impartial consideration of the matter you're dealing with. And if there is a complaint, make sure you keep to the timescales for responding and update the complainant if delays are likely and respond to all points raised. The Ombudsman letter has highlighted that there were some delays by Tendering District Council in responding to some of those complaints and the process, and as you can see in the report, the Chief Executive has brought that to the attention of management team members, and that information has been disseminated through to senior managers as well to improve those timescales. We have also said in our delivery to senior managers that more time should be spent at the stage 1 process. More time should be spent trying to, being more thorough at stage 1. I'm not saying that we don't ever want to get to a situation where we don't have stage 2s or complaints to the Ombudsman, because personally I believe that's a healthy place to be through an organisation, to be looking for continuous improvement. But we have emphasised to spend more time on that earlier part of the process. The other thing I wanted to highlight was that on page 45 in the table that you have, I just wanted to explain what the last category means, referred back to the Council as not progressed through its own procedure. The Ombudsman will not accept a complaint from an individual if they have not gone through the Council's internal complaints procedure. So that is where the complainant has failed by not taking matters through the complaints procedure in the first instance. So they just get batted back to us and the complainant to enter into dialogue and to look at. So that is the other thing I was just going to mention is that the Housing Ombudsman has got his own complaint handling code. The Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman has just reviewed its complaint handling code. We've already got a decision from Cabinet, which is that we are going to now review the general procedure to have a look at how it aligns with the Housing Ombudsman. The Housing Ombudsman Complaint Code requires a member to be identified as having responsibility for housing complaints. For tendering, that is Councillor Baker as the portfolio holder for housing. The leader is responsible for general complaints across the council under the general procedure, but we will, as officers, be bringing back a report on whether and how our general procedures need to be adapted at all in light of the new handling code. So that's a piece of ongoing work. So, Chairman, hopefully that was a summary of the position, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Please bear in mind can't go into the detail of the actual complaints, and those have already been reported. But if there are any specific questions I couldn't answer, I could take them back and get some general responses back.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I just want to thank Cabinet for giving this role to Audit Committee, because as I believe it was just going to Council previously, and perhaps not enough time in Council to identify risks or resolve similarities. We can discuss this more in audit, so I welcome that. And also for transparency, which is something you already mentioned. I just have one question. Looking at those tables, I've noticed that the figures do go up slightly over the years. Is there any explanation to that?
Whilst the figures do go up, I've already highlighted with regards to complaints upheld that row. So if we look at page 45 and we look at the data, so complaints upheld, I've explained, that there was 2 in 21-22 and the same. And in tenderings eyes, we had 2 this year, but the Ombudsman has got a different view. We've got 4, so that's my explanation there. With regards to compliance, we have complied, we got 100%, so if a complaint is received and a recommendation has been given, we've complied with it. There's also some figures there on satisfactory remedy provided by the organisation. You've got data on complaints not upheld, which is just as important as those that have been. The ones that are higher are the ones not investigated by the Ombudsman, and they'll be for various reasons. The Ombudsman will not look into matters where there is another right of appeal. They will also, if the matter's not gone through the council's own process, they won't investigate it. Sometimes it depends on the type of complaints as well. And if they relate to a different form of complaints process, I'm just going to put it that way, then they're encouraged to go through the correct complaints process to whatever that is. So we have, I believe that if you had no complaints or you had consistent low complaints, I'd also question why as well. We've got figures here. The way the Ombudsman provides their data, it's based on every 100,000 residents within the district. So it's humankind, isn't it? Things go wrong. Complaints are made. The most important thing for us, on behalf of the Chief Exec, is that we learn from the lessons from the complaints. If we're continually making the same mistakes, that's an issue. And, I think that's the thing that this committee could have oversight of, to see if there was reoccurring patterns. Because if there are reoccurring patterns, that's what we've got to address as an organisation.
Totally. I mean, I noticed there's quite a few planning, for instance, sort of reoccur on the ones from 2021. But yeah, that's definitely something we can look at. Any further questions? Yep, Councillor Fairley.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of questions. When somebody makes a complaint, are we absolutely confident that the complaint process that they have to follow is clear? So that would be a first question. Shall I carry on with others, or do you want to do that one first?
I'll do that one first. Depending on how I answer, you might have another question. um, so our complaint system, as it is, follows best practice. We think it's clear. However, as I've said, we are going to do a review against the new complaint handling code that's come out from the local government ombudsman, and probably, there'll be things that we can improve and look at. We don't have many queries on the complaints process itself. It's more, if there are queries, it's more about maybe delays in going through the process than the actual process itself. The other thing I would say is, if a complaint is received and it's unclear what the purpose of the complaint is, you would expect the relevant service to go back and make inquiries, to try to draw that out from the complainant. You'd expect that to be done. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, no, it's good that it's going to be reviewed, and in that, equally, when you're looking at processes, procedures, if you like, and then you're looking at policy, are we confident that our processes match up where they should link in with policies, or is there any review that needs to happen there to ensure that processes match policies?
I'm smiling, Councillor Fairley, because with my job, I would expect the council, if the council has adopted a policy, that we follow it. I think that the report, highlights on page 46 that we have come across situations where we have got a policy and it hasn't been followed. So that's why that message has been reinforced back across the organisation. At the moment, there's a number of policies going through Cabinet which are being approved, mainly in relation to the work of the Housing Ombudsman. My comments normally are, if we have a policy, can we make sure it's being monitored and how we're performing against it? So they're things that we are reinforcing. But I think it's fair to say there has been some examples we've not followed our own policies, yes.
What sort of actions would you then be expecting senior management to be taking to ensure that that feedback is acted upon, and what are the things that as an audit committee we would be able to look at to be able to see whether there's positive change or whether there is any trends?
It's a good question, because I suppose it depends on how often the Audit Committee would like to look at this. This is the annual letter, so you could look at the annual letter next year and get this report and see if there's been any improvements. That doesn't feel quite right to me, actually, because, just to wait a year is probably not the right thing to do. Maybe if I'd suggest, and it's just a suggestion and I'm thinking out loud now, but when we do the review of the actual policy and procedure for the complaints process that we've identified, that we could maybe look at some sort of monitoring, the way the Audit Committee could monitor this in relation to those ongoing themes. I would like to see those bullet points on page 46 reduce. And that message has been given by the Chief Executive very clearly, and as I sit on management team, we discussed this report, we discussed the annual letter, and that was the message given, and that message has been given to all senior managers. Now we've got to see what happens.
Yeah, those pointers on page 46 are actually a very good indication as to what we need to work towards. So, yeah, it's like a tick off. Once we reach each point, that would be a good thing. Yeah, brilliant. Any more questions? Okay, so the recommendation then to receive the notes and report and approve a practice whereby annual letters from LGSCO are submitted to this committee for full consideration in the future as part of its role in assessing external regulatory reports and monitoring any quality improvement programs where required, with comments to be provided to Cabinet as appropriate, and determines whether it wishes on this occasion to comment to Cabinet on the process of oversight of complaints and the learning from those complaints. I think the only thing I would say is the timeliness, that I don't really see how that was oversighted. That would be my only comment, but I'm happy to move this. And I need a seconder.
Councillor Platt, if you actually wished, to include anything under recommendation B, then you can do so. You know, that's the purpose of this report. If you wish to give any comments back to Cabinet on the back of this report, then feel free to do so.
I think what you said about waiting a year is too long. I mean, generally our audit papers are quite light, so you know we only meet 4 times a year. So let's just have it as an ongoing item on the agenda as to where we are, and be aware of any complaints that are actually going through. Thank you.
Chairman, members of the committee as well, thinking about now supporting the Audit Committee in its role, would you like to request that the 2 members responsible for oversight of complaints come to the Audit Committee as well? Because the reason for saying that is there is quite a lot of emphasis at the moment from the Housing Ombudsman that we do keep on top of oversight of complaints throughout the year. So, you know, you could request those 2 members to come along to sort of ask what they're doing in relation to those roles.
Do we all agree to that yet? I think we would, yeah.
As to, you know, the ABC of running of what they do, so we've got a bit of an understanding. So we're not starting at square one in the meeting. We've got some research and background beforehand.
So like a progress, perhaps, progress report.
Sort of question, just to in my mind, because the point you made, Lisa, around because the annual letter will automatically be on your work programme. That's absolutely fine. The point you made, Lisa, around the guidance, the role of the audit committee, and what you just mentioned there, it's kind of chicken and egg, isn't it? Is that for me, there's a real pragmatic thing to say actually, as part of that review, digesting that guidance, then the role of the audit committee is what you're saying is you want to see include that in that wider guidance. So I'm just thinking, is it, again, it's don't wait too long, but I'm just wondering, do we capture the audit committee's asks as part of that review, and then we come back and actually formulate what does that look like? Because if not, I think we get a bit bitty in terms of what does that mean. So is that pragmatic? Because I know it's a bit of a time to wait, though, isn't it?
The review's got to happen. You know, we've already talked about the review, so we can do that for the next meeting of the committee, whenever it is. I do feel, though, that it probably would be good to bring in the member responsible for housing complaints, because the Housing Ombudsman has already identified what that role is. So we've got that for the member responsible for complaints under housing, but we can articulate that more in relation to the next report. So I think it's about bringing lots of things together, Richard, but yeah, I'm more than happy that we take feedback from today and put that in the review of our general procedure as well.
Okay. So, okay, so, yeah. So we have that added in. So, yeah, just need a seconder.
With those amendments, yes, Chair, I'm happy to second that. Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Fairley to second. Thank you. Okay, item 7, report of the Assistant Director of Finance and IT, table of outstanding issues. Karen.
Can I just interrupt? Is that okay? I think that just conscious of Damon's timing, because Damon needs to be somewhere, don't you, Damon? So, are you happy if, because there's the update on the housing review, wasn't there, in the table in Appendix A of Table Extension Report? Sorry, Karen, to introduce. But you okay to give an update in terms of those things first, Damon, if that's all right, and then we've got more time then to talk about the more general reports. Thank you. Thank you. If that's okay with people. Yeah.
Thank you, Damien.
Are we ready? Thank you. So since the last time I came here, we continue to still monitor our performance against the regulatory standards. They fall under 4 themes: safety and quality standards, transparency, influence and accountability standard, neighbourhood and community standard, and tenancy standards. And within each of those, there's a little subsection that goes into multiple areas that we monitor our performance against. We meet on a monthly basis with a portfolio holder for housing, who talks us through, challenges us, asks us where we've got to, and asks us to explain where we think we are in relation to that standard. We're looking at, we rate ourselves, RAG rating, of red, amber and green, and currently we're predominantly ambers and greens, so we're moving in the right direction, which is great. Since the last time we met, I have asked ILGA, the East of England Local Government Association, to come in and just have a look at where we are and critique where we are, just to see whether we're either being too hard on ourselves or too favourable on ourselves. So, strangely enough, part of the feedback was actually yes, because although you have an ultimate goal, if you're going to just keep that as, say, an amber, you are making steps as you move forward, and you ought to be recording those positive steps moving forward. So that's one of the things we've been looking at, about how we record that, how we say, yes, we've achieved this small chunk, then we move on to the next, then we move on to the next, with that view of continuous improvement. Talking with Craig's team, who have now booked in and started an audit of that, as acting as critical friend, so that they can be looking at that standard and they can be monitoring us as well, advising us and guiding us as to where we've got to in relation to that standard. That will form part of a regular report back to this committee. So that it'll be an annual report back. We have to do an annual report back to the regulator, which goes to Cabinet for approval. And actually, Craig and I have been talking about what that timescale looks like, because it makes no sense to come to you post that. It ought to come to you before it goes to Cabinet, so you can see what we're doing, and we'll have that discussion about what that time looks like and what the format of that report looks like as well. So from my perspective, it's positive. All of those regulatory standards are now built into people's one-to-ones, so they understand what they should be working and striving towards. We mentioned about policy as well, so as you'll see through Cabinet, there's a regular update of housing policies that are going through the system, making sure they're updated, but staff are also being made aware of those changes, made aware of the new policies, and we're in the process of organising training sessions around all of those new policies as well. Because as Lisa mentioned, you have a policy, you have to follow the policy. So it's making sure that staff are aware of what that policy is and then adherence to that as they move forward. So generally, that's what we're doing. We're still moving ahead, we're still challenging ourselves, and we're still improving as we move forward. I've been having conversations with a group that we belong to, the Association of Retained Council Houses, and that's quite a large number of local authorities who've got retained stock, who share information. And I've also recently had a conversation with a local authority who have just been through the regulatory inspection and come out at a C2, and they've agreed that they're happy to come down to us and share that experience and share what they went through as part of that regulatory inspection as well. So there's a lot of work going on in the background. It's positive, and we're moving in the right direction. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Platt.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Damien, for that brief update there. So, could you mentioned about the risk and the red, amber, green, the RAG rating, etc., etc. What RAG rating would you now give Spendles?
Well, Spendles is a slightly different thing. It's so the consumer standards in relation to how our tenants live within our properties and the quality of those properties, and then the service that we give. So Spendles, and I can't make too much of a comment on Spendles because, as you're aware, there's an investigation going on. So I don't think Spendles falls into that, because its intended use is to support the homeless rather than our tenants who are in our stock at the moment.
Could I apply the same question to the site at Wheelie?
Again, that's a former office accommodation site. It's not housing stock.
Right, okay. So where as a member of the council, is that for a different committee to look at? Is that something, is that not...
In relation to Wheelie or Spendles or both?
Both.
So those are currently going through overview and scrutiny, and there's a future task and finish group that will be looking at assets, where the Wheelie issue will come up as part of that group.
So, would the Audit Committee get to see that task and finish report once it's completed?
First of all, I'll come in on Spendles and Wheelie, because I was at Resources and Services this week. Know how to have fun. And both of those matters came up, and they will be, first of all, the asset review will cover Wheelie specifically. That was discussed in the meeting. And the other thing that we have said, but not publicly, is once the investigation on Spendles is completed, there will be some information that would be right to go through both audit and overview and scrutiny. So we'll probably end up doing a joint session, so we'll do something informally first and then think about how we're going to put that into the public domain. So Richard and I had already been thinking about it. There is overlap, so let's come together and do those bits of work. So definitely something will be coming to audit and overview and scrutiny on Spendles when we're able to do so.
Thank you. And that might include the task and finish report.
Well, the asset review, I think, is separate. That will go to Resources and Services. There is a protocol with how Cabinet overview and scrutiny, and we're going to extend it to Audit Committee, could look at the way they work together, and there are meetings going to be planned. So actually we can look at, you know, where there's things in an overview and scrutiny task and finish report that actually ends up overlapping into the role of audit, how do we deal with it? You know, so
from a risk perspective, because you know audit looks at risk, you know the risk around, let's take Wheelie for example, that could be something that this committee should be exploring.
there is guidance out there on how the overlap between Audit Committee and Overview and Scrutiny on exactly risk and risk management, and obviously some elements to do with the finances as well. So there's work out there that we could pull upon to look at, you know, bringing them to both committees.
Sorry to stop everyone, but Damien, if you need to obviously get away, then that's absolutely fine. Damien needs to attend another meeting, so yeah, we're a bit short on time. Yeah. If you could add to that, Richard, thank you.
I was also going to say, with the item on Appendix A, is that it talks about how we feedback the outcome from that ongoing housing review. Are you still here, Damien? Good. Housing review, he's worried what I'm going to say, about the housing review, and we'll add it to your standing work programme. I think we don't lose it, because I think rather than it be, I think it's on there, and then we talk about the timing of that, so we don't miss it. So when we bring that back to you in March every year, it's an item that can be on there for 1, 2, 3 years until we're satisfied. So I think it needs to be on your work programme as a standing item, so it doesn't slip through, potentially slip through a net. So hopefully happy with that. Damien, sorry, time-wise.
Yeah, sorry, from my perspective, it's an item that's on there ad infinitum. It's not an item that will remove because of that regulatory requirement. So I think it's something that will sit with the Audit Committee moving forward until a regulatory standard changes. I think it is something the regulator is not anxious, that's not the word, wants it to go through an audit process, wants it to be monitored, and I think that's appropriate for where we are. So it will become a regular standing item. Unfortunately, you get to see me more frequently.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we can now continue with the report with Karen.
Thank you, Chair and members. Just go back to the report now on the table of outstanding issues. You firstly got Appendix A, which is the general items from the committee, a little bit of which we've covered just there with Damien, and then Appendix B, the annual governance statement action plan. In terms of A, there aren't any particular significant issues to raise, with work remaining in progress. In respect of the 23-24 annual governance statement, that still remains subject to the committee's final approval later in the year upon the conclusion of the external auditor, but it's included for your information now. And you'll notice that Appendix B therefore has outstanding items from last year's AGS carried over for action this year. The next point is the appointment of an independent person or persons to the Audit Committee. We've discussed it briefly in the last couple of committees, and Richard was asked to go away and conduct this piece of work, which he has dutifully completed, and you'll see there an action plan of how we can potentially implement the appointment of independent persons, with the first point being to develop a role and person specification, which we've been working on in the background a little bit to start with, and then you'll see the rest of the plan there. don't know if you've got anything further to add on that, Richard, at the moment.
Just want to say that hopefully that conversation we had previously was that we'll get together and before the end of December and discuss that in much more detail than we could here. So hope that's okay with the committee.
Yep, that's absolutely okay.
That's all on that point.
Do we have any questions? Sorry, Karen. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I was just letting Richard get that little bit in on independent persons. Moving on, external audit delays. We have Emma here kindly joining us today. At the time of writing this report, the government had proposed to move the backstop date a little bit. You'll see on page 62, hopefully it's page 62 on your reports, the new dates listed there and for the upcoming years. So that should provide a little bit of reassurance as to where we are with those. There's also an item up there on external funding that went to Cabinet last week on the 20th of September, where Cabinet were asked to agree that an external funding policy be developed for approval by the leader that will in turn be presented to a future audit committee to seek their support and assurance on the governance processes relating to that. Again, Richard, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate any further on that.
Not at the moment, no. Hopefully that was a request by Cabinet, so hopefully the committee is happy to take that task on as part of your normal terms of reference and support the council in developing that external funding policy. Yep.
Is that something new, Richard, or did it go somewhere else before with the funding policy? Like, did it get scrutinised anywhere else or questioned?
No. I think what we're developing that now. It's the right place for the committee. So in the past, there was what we've had is inconsistency. So I think we've applied sort of the right governance to external funding. It's in the constitution and various requirements in the financial procedure rules. But I think bringing it together to provide that consistency across the council when we do provide external funding is important. So I think this is a policy that you'll be seeing shortly.
Yeah, well, we welcome that, I'm sure. Any questions? Thank you, Councillor Platt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Karen, for your report there. And I welcome the thought from the leader of the external funding coming through to this committee and gathering our support for that. I'd be interested to hear from our external auditor or our future external auditor the views on where we are with the latest dates that have been put forward and how any level of confidence that we might have in those proposed dates, and are they willing to pick up, apologies if this has been covered previously, from where BDO have left off and not completed the job.
Thank you. So there's a couple of things just to point out there. So the legislation for the new backstop dates has been laid, so we've got to wait for that just to be approved, so that will take a little bit of time. That actually brings the backstop date slightly earlier for the 23-24 accounts, so that's just worth noting. So under the original plan, it was due to be, I think it was May, was the original 23-24 accounts. Under that new proposal, it's bringing it forward to the end of February, so for the ones that we will need to sign. So what does that mean? So it means that obviously from a prior audit, so you've got till the end, well, till mid-December to get those accounts finished or disclaimed. We have had some communication now from BDO, so I'm getting a handover call in the diary to talk to see where they are with those. But I think my understanding and from the briefings they've given to the committee in the past is that they are expecting a disclaimer for some of those prior year opinions. For 23-24, I think it's fair to say we've started. We're a good way through, so I've got my team is out at the moment. They've done the vast majority of the planning work, and we will be hitting most of the year-end work for 23-24 in the coming weeks. So from my perspective, for the 23-24 closing position, I think that's quite important to note there. I'm expecting that we will be a good way through that by the end of the year. The bit that we still need some clarification on is around the opening balance position. There will be some degree of work we will do over the opening balances, but we are sort of awaiting some guidance from the NAO in terms of what that level of that work will consist of. But what you should expect is that there will remain a modification to the audit opinion for 23-24 in relation to the opening balance position. And over time, over the next sort of 3 years, that will be building itself back up. And that is consistent across the sector, and what you will see for all sort of opinions where there has been disclaimed prior year accounts. What we want is to reduce the number of years that are disclaimed in the opening position, so that as much BDO can get done, the better. And then the other key thing I think to note is that value for money. So you will be getting, so it is a requirement that BDO do VFM reporting up through to the accounts that they have been appointed for. And we also will do the VFM reporting. So again, that's a good way through. Actually, I think my Jodie, my manager, has done a great amount of work on that already for the 23-24 accounts. So we should be able to be in a position to bring you our initial risk assessment around VFM in the next committee. So from my perspective, we're doing as much as we possibly can to get 23-24 completed in time for that backstop date. But I say that the thing just to remember is that obviously we'll have an opening balance which hasn't been audited, and we will not be auditing that full opening balance position.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can continue. So thank you ever so much, Emma, for that. That's nothing new to me. So, Richard, if I may, the disclaimed position, how do you see that having an effect on tendering's position? And thinking also about the leaders' thoughts about seeking external funding and how that might impact our opportunity to seek external funding if we've got disclaimers on our accounts.
Yeah, so just sort of going back to the position after speaking to BDO recently, that the position as of today is that they hope to submit, and we've got to organise another meeting because the 13th of December backstop date, they'll want to report their audit results report to you before then, and the value for money report that Emma referred to. So that's the position. So 2021 should be what I call usual, as in just several years late, but it should be the sort of standard report coming to you. Still trying to resolve those outstanding issues that we spoke about before, with the gross internal floor area of our assets and also the infrastructure useful life. That's still ongoing with a third associated item, which I'm still talking to them about, and hopefully resolve that quite quickly. So, and then 2 years disclaimed, so 21, 22 and 22, 23 disclaimed. I think the good thing is with the timing of where we are with the 23-24 accounts, it's almost sort of like trumps the previous years, because the work that KPMG will be doing I'm glad it's only February, because we've only got a sort of small period in between. That hopefully cleans up all these years of uncertainty. So we'll have a set of accounts that are signed off with a value for money opinion with it as well. But going back to the point that BDO will be submitting a value for money commentary as part of their, before the 30th of December backstop date, I think will be more helpful. We don't raise money. We don't use our assets to raise money at all. So unlike the commercial sector where they're heavily reliant upon a balance sheet, I don't think we necessarily are. So I don't think it affects us in that regard. So I think it's a risk, but a small risk. But I think with the February, so in some respects it's earlier, which causes capacity and workload issues. But I think February's good, because I think it will just clean up all this uncertainty from the last 4 years of the accounts. So I think that's me, hopefully the positive. We can move forward on from that February backstop date.
Just elaborate a little bit more about the seeking of external funding and how the disclaimer might affect it. Is it immaterial in your mind?
No, I think for me, when you look at bodies that wish to fund us, I think they're very much around our financial sustainability, our governance arrangements, and our say procurement rules, financial procedure rules, and I think that is picked up in the value for money commentary, use resources, financial sustainability, and the kind of the softer stuff. But in my view, it's more important than the value of the town hall in terms of the importance to the outside world. So how we manage our money, how we deliver services, I think will all be contained in that value for money. So I think that's the thing that's been looked at in terms of our financial standing, our reputation. How do we deal with our financial challenges and bits and pieces? I think that's much more important to the outside world, to get a really good view of how tendering does things and where tendering are in terms of our financial position and how we're responding to it. So I think that for me would cause more harm if that was a poor commentary on what we do. So I'm sure up and down the country you'll have councils that are in a position that do get a very poor report, and that has significant consequences. I'm not imagining that's us at all. There'll always be things we can do better, no doubt. And again, it's the view that, do we sort of say thank you for that and ignore it? No, we won't. We'll say thank you for that, and we'll put the improvements in place if we have to make sure that the outside world perceives us reputationally sound in terms of managing finances. I think that's the most important thing, that reputational side of life. As we always say, you can get destroyed overnight, and we don't want to be anywhere near giving a position to the outside world that we can't manage money well.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so recommendations then. The committee notes and considers the progress against the actions set out in Appendix A and B, and that in respect of the appointment of an independent person or persons to the Audit Committee, the committee notes and agrees the actions set out in this report, requests officers to finalise a draft role, person specification, and make the necessary arrangements to consult with members of the Audit Committee as highlighted in the plan, and that the outcome of the above be presented back to the January meeting of the committee. And again, I'm happy to move that. And I just need
Chairman,
a second.
Sorry, we also need to add in the point that Richard raised about adding Damien's housing item to the committee's work programme. So if that could be incorporated as well. Thank you.
And with that additionality then, with that you're happy to see you wish to see that.
So, seconder, please. Yep, lovely, thank you. Okay, and that concludes our meeting. Next scheduled meeting then is the 30th of January 2025.
And if I can just sort of say that we'll be in touch, as we say, to find out availability to slot in the one where we bring the 3 years outstanding accounts to you. So before that 30th of December date.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. So yeah, we will probably have something in between now and January. We do, Karen. We have already set a date for that.
We do, Councillor Fairley. I'll just go over the date so that I don't want anyone to miss out.